Sweet surrender as I love, serve, and remember.
Are really intimate with nature. And then I thought, well, we all have a relationship with nature, right? It's not, it comes just like our relationship with the divine. It all has different forms. I was asking Julian if he had any memory of, or what stood out with him about nature, and he was talking about when he was in middle school, they were out playing football, and suddenly it started pouring rain, which is something that doesn't happen in Livermore often in the warm weather. And they hadn't played football in the rain before, and so they stopped and they decided we're going to keep playing. And he said it was just so magical. He said all the fighting, who did what, all stopped. He said we just played, and it was harmonious, and you can just tell that it just up-leveled their vibration to just enjoy the game for the game as the pouring rain is soaking them through. So I want to begin with just inviting you to remember we've all had, I'm sure, many, many, many memories of nature, of a moment of nature. And so I just invite you just to call forth one, just to get it activated in your inner life. John Muir said, as we go out, we go within. So just remember, just of all the memories you have, just pick one and try to cultivate the sensory memory of it, not just the intellectual memory. What did it smell like? Was there smells, the sight, the hearing, the sound, obviously. The taste, was there a taste to it? What did it feel like in your body? Just really use your sense memory. And so I just invite you to be with this memory throughout our morning this morning. Just allow it to continue to feed you, even as it fed you in that moment. My guess is, and especially being in classes with so many of you and hearing many of these stories, one of the things that you feel with this memory is awe and wonder. That one of the great things that nature does for us is it opens us up in awe and wonder. Louis Schwartzberg says, he started the time delay photography in nature 40 years ago, and has continued to grow it. And he said, wonder is the portal for love. Rudolf Steiner says, to be on a spiritual journey, the foundation is wonder. And so he started the Waldorf schools, for those of you who are familiar with the Waldorf schools, which was not, as Jack and I said, our intention was not to teach kindergartner Shakespeare. I was at Starbucks yesterday, and a father I haven't tried it, so I shouldn't knock it, but he had a little kid with him, and they were doing an app called Brilliance, and it's how to think outside the box. And I'm like, I don't think he's learned the box yet to think outside of it, but it's like this, we're going to get really smart kids. But Waldorf is all about cultivating wonder, opening kids up to the mystery, to the excitement of the universe. And so one of the things he suggests for children is for them to move as much away from the urban areas and to spend as much time in nature, because nature is what opens us up to that awe and wonder. There's a friendship that we feel. Louis Schwartzberg said one of the things he's learned in all of his years of his photography was, he said, not only is nature something that is survival of the fittest, it's the survival of the kindest. He said nature serves one another. When he watches the flower open up and it draws in, he says it seduces the bees and the butterflies and the bats and the hummingbirds to come and suck from it. He said there's this life of interdependence. Fungi feeds the trees in their webs, the mother tree feeding the baby trees far away, and then telling all these amazing things about what trees do, which I know some of you all know, with the roots underneath. He said this is why we call it Mother Nature, because nature takes care of itself. Even those animals who were created to kill, they don't do it out of viciousness, they do it for survival. But it's not out of viciousness, it's not to hurt. This is what nature is. It takes care of itself. It watches over itself, and it watches over us. We would not exist if fungi didn't exist. We would not exist if flowers didn't exist. We would not exist if trees don't exist. All of this nature is here to support us. It's Mother Nature. It's here to help us. And we feel that awe and wonder when we're in nature because we know we didn't create it. If you go into a city, you know that that city is there because human beings created it. That doesn't make it less than, well, it just makes it different. So when you walk in, that's a human created thing. When you go out into nature, no human being created nature. We did not create this extraordinary earth. We did not create the trillions of galaxies. We did not create every minutia detail. Oh my gosh, some of this photography that Louis does, just like the drop falling off a leaf, but it's also mirroring a flower, right? So it looks like the flower's inside the drop. I mean, it's just stunning. And the minutest of details. We didn't create that, and I think it's why we like being there. Because so much of our life is about being in control, about figuring things out, especially with technology. I mean, it's getting more and more complicated, and you have to, I remember when we first got new phones back in the 90s, and you had to take a class on how to use them. And I'm like, this is so weird, you have to take a class on how to use a phone. But everything is learning and learning and learning, but when you're out in nature, there's just an effortless, intuitive sense. And we know that we didn't create human beings. We know none of us created ourselves. You came into this earth, but you didn't create you. You can participate in it, just like we can participate in nature, but we didn't create it. And that very awareness, whether you're consciously thinking of it or not when you're in nature, intuitively that soul, that nature, as Julian said, human nature, our human nature knows to be in awe and wonder because we're not the ones in charge. And that's what makes nature so beautiful, so surrendered, to listen and to feel into this incredible wisdom that we get to participate in but are not in control. I was listening to also a photographer. He also is a little bit of a geologist, loves the science of it. And he's been to 38 countries, and he always, never in the cities, always often in the wilds. And he says, there's times where I've had to be in this survival state. You don't know if you're gonna make it. And he said, or you're walking, I'm freezing, and I'm walking through the Arctic or Greenland, and he said, but everywhere is sky, and it's beautiful. And I knew at the end of this trip I was gonna have to go home. And he said, that's hard for me. I realized survival is actually easy because it's very simple. It's right there before you. Oh, I got to do this, and then I have food at the end of the day. And he said, I knew when I came back I'd have taxes and relationships and traffic lights and traffic jams. And he just said the nature is peace. We get to experience something so much greater. Last week, we were talking about the trillions of galaxies, to feel that infinite nature and just to let go. I love what I was asking Julian's girlfriend, Audrey, yesterday about nature, how she felt about it, because she's had a different experience than I have. She's grown up on a ranch her whole life. She's 17, so for 17 years of her life, her family has about 1,000 acres of land. So their home is surrounded by a lot of land and animals. And so I asked her, I said, well, do you get tired of it? Do you ever wish you were like around people more? She said, no, I just love it. She said, every morning I wake up, I just feel rejuvenated. It's so peaceful. I go away, go to school, do the stuff, whatever I'm doing. I come back and I just release. 1,000 acres of land. It's so peaceful. It's rejuvenating. And I don't get bored. It's like saying, do you get bored of God? Like this, the divine presence, can you get bored? You'll get bored if you think you know everything, but when you realize there's so much you don't know, and you're not in control, you can let go, you can surrender and trust and open and make yourself available. And then I said, well, because you're around nature all the time, does camping just seem redundant because you're already out in the landscape? And she said, no, I love camping. I love being in all sorts of types of nature, in the woods, in camping in the woods. It feels so good. And for me, it just continues to speak of the infinite nature. Nature is such a wonderful reflection of the divine. So it'd be like saying, okay, you have a really strong meditation practice in this. Do you feel joy in doing it? So let me give an example. Reverend Michael Beckwith, who is one of my mentors, his main meditation practice is mindfulness meditation. Hours every day for decades. And he exudes it as a state of consciousness. However, if he's with someone who's doing yoga, doing the fire breath of yoga and doing all this stuff, he's right there. He loves it. He doesn't go, oh, that's okay. I have my own meditation practice. I don't need to try yours. He's right, not only is he right there, he enjoys it even more because he's gone so deeply in his own path, he can make that shift pretty quickly. And this is the joy of life. It's like you find your path and you just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. And then you get to experience all of it, to open our hearts to all of it. So for me, nature continues to remind us of it, the infinite nature of God. We have the concept of it. But to remember, when you hear the trillions of stars, when you go into the forest or to the beaches, every time you go into nature, it's a different experience. Even if you're on for 17 years on the same piece of land, it's different. It's not going to be the same year to year. You go camping, it's going to be different. And we get to open up in awe and wonder all of the time. Isn't this a great way to live? And we feel into, and this I know, because again, being in classes, as I mentioned in my weekly email, by far the greatest response when I ask people about the divine presence, it's in nature. So I know you know what I'm talking about. I'm not saying this is, I talked about like this is a remembering, because I know you already know all this. This past week, I was talking to Beth Stiles, who was our board president, former board president. She lives up in Cloverdale. And just as a blessing to our former board president today, her family is honoring her father. This is the anniversary of his transition, so they're getting together to do a blessing for him. But as I was talking with her, she suddenly, out of the blue, lifts up this rock. And she goes, oh, I've been holding this rock the whole time we've been talking. And I hold it with both hands. It just fits so perfectly, and I feel the energy of it. And I said, well, why do you do that? Like, I was just trying to, I said, I'm talking about nature. Because it was so interesting, and I know that's why I feel funny even speaking about nature, because like our entire conversation, nature was weaved in. Like, she just can't help it. And I know many of you are like this. It just flows from her, the birds, the ocean. She just talks in that way. And she said, for her, it's all about being present, opening up always to the present and seeing what's there. I don't want to go, so when I go to a beach and find a rock, or on a walk and I find a rock, and it's just, I look at it and it's just a rock, but she sees something special. And she says, I have to be present to it. I have to see it. I have to be aware of it and its uniqueness and honor it. And so for those of you who know her, often she'll have small pebbles that she'll hold in her hand, and then she'll give it as a gift, because it's put all her energy of love and light in the rock. And Beth is one of the most intuitive people I know, because she's tapping into, when you're in nature, as we all do, when you're in nature, you start having these intuitive senses. It's not a rational thing. She's not rationally saying, okay, I need a rock and I'm going to find a rock. There's something flowing through her. That's what nature does for us. It opens us up. It's the portal to the divine love. It opens us up. So when we connect with nature, we are present with it every moment, because it's always changing and it never gets boring, and it has energy to it, and we're connecting with it and we feel it. And the beauty of it is that this nature is responding to us. So many of you have talked about in classes, when I ask, well, have you felt ever an experience of a loved one on the other side of the veil? Almost always, I would say 90% of the time, that connection happens through nature in some way. A bird that shows up, or an animal that shows up, or something that happens. That it's an amazing thing to recognize that this divine life is communicating to us through nature. There's no intermediary. There's no human-made. I always love Emerson's quote, get my bloated nothingness out of the way. In nature, there's no bloated nothingness in the way. There's no intermediary. It's you and this beautiful relationship, again, that we're not in control of. When right before I had my aneurysm in 2019, I think, I had two dreams, so I had a sense it was coming. I was paying attention. And we live right around the corner here, and I've never seen a turkey vulture in this area, in this particular area. Definitely in Livermore, but not here. And I walked out of my apartment. After these 2 dreams, I walked out of our apartment, and there's just the balcony, about this far away from the door, and there's a turkey vulture just sitting there staring at me. I knew that was not just a turkey vulture just staring at me. I knew this was the divine loving me enough to speak to me through the turkey vulture. And I know you all do this too. And if you don't, I invite you to, when you have animals cross your path, or you look them up and you say, what does it symbolically mean? And so I went back into the house, shut the door, and it meant death and resurrection, new life. It was a renewal of energy. You have to die, though, to have the renewal of energy. And I knew that it was related to the 2 dreams. So 3 days later, when I want to say when I had my aneurysm, it actually turned out I was already having it at that time. I didn't know it until I couldn't talk right. But about 3 days later, and I didn't feel any fear because the divine had shown up to me and I had received the message. I had heard the message and I believed the message. So when people say, oh, they feel something from the other side, I don't know if it's yes. If you're having some intuitive sense that something from nature has come to your doorstep or crossed your path in any way, and you have a sense that, well, it might be speaking to me, yes, it's speaking to you. That is the divine loving you through nature. There's no intermediary. It's the divine activity of pure spirit. And this is why we love nature. And it's mysterious. And this is the part that I love as well, that brings the awe and the wonder. So this guy, John Beatty, who I was listening to, been to the 38 countries, and he loves the science of it. He loves to learn why nature does the things that it does. He said it doesn't take away from the joy of experiencing it, but he likes to understand it. And he said, and then there's all those experiences that can't be explained with all the stuff that I've learned scientifically. Some things I just don't know why. One time he was in Namibia, and he's off by himself, and he's traveling through a path, and suddenly these wild baboons show up, just a few of them. And he knows not to look at them, so he looks down, and they're very agitated, but he just keeps looking down, and he stays there. And eventually they're like, okay, and they take off. And he walks further into the trail, and he says, and then there's this like pile of rocks with a baboon head on it, skull. And he came up with all sorts of, I don't know, how did it end up there? He didn't ever explain that. He just mentioned that he came upon this thing with this pile of rocks with a baboon head, and he had no idea who did it or how that got there. So now he's coming home, and he said, suddenly all these baboons started coming out of nowhere. And he said, I had about 40 to 60 baboons, very agitated, and you know how loud baboons can get. And he said, and there's more coming across the marsh. I can't get back to my campsite because they're blocking the way. And he said, I'm scared for my life. I don't know what to do. He's by himself. 40 to 60 baboons, just really agitated. What do I do? He said, I looked off to the distance, and there seemed to be a lead baboon off to the distance standing there. And he said, I don't know what made me do it, but I just raised my hand like this. I didn't have a rational thought of why I was doing it. I just raised my hand, looking at the baboon. And this are wild baboons. And the wild baboon then raised his hand, his arm. And they stared at each other, and then he put his arm down. And then the other baboon put his arm down, and as he put his arm down, all the baboons quieted down and walked away. So I have no explanation for that, because I can't tell you. I'm scared for my life. Why did I raise my arm? What happened there? I don't know. And isn't that when life is amazing? Don't you just go, there's so many things we don't know, and that's the beauty of awe and wonder. And sometimes we can take away from that awe and wonder when we want it to control or understand. I'm someone who loves structure. I love maps. I like to understand things. But it can take away the joy, if we get too attached to it, of the mystery. I remember when I was a kid, so I was the youngest of 3. So I remember this so clear, sitting at the dinner table. My brother was going off to college, and and everyone was happy. It was a good college, and I just thought, this is an elementary school. I said, So he's going to go off to college, probably do well, get a good job, get married, have kids, retire, and die. I don't get it. Like, it was so unappealing to me. Like, why would, it's like your whole life is planned ahead of you. If we have no mystery, if it's just presented, even when we say, well, if you have a dream, or if you feel if you go after your bliss, then you're going to have this experience, then you're going to be all happy in life. So if you do this, basically cause and effect. We teach cause and effect. If you have this cause, you're going to have this effect. And there's truth to it. I'm not saying there's not truth to it. But if we live too much in this mechanistic idea, we lose the wonder. Sometimes it's like great to have something completely out of the blue, like 40 to 60 baboons coming at you agitatedly for something miraculous to happen that you can't plan and that you don't know how to get out of it. You don't know the cause that's going to change the effect. That's what we want to live in as well. We want to understand the world, but not let our understanding confuse us to think that we're in control, that we know everything. We don't have a clue how to create an earth as amazing as this, the human body as amazing as this, galaxies, trillions of galaxies, that's amazing it is. We don't have a clue when it really comes to it. So it allows us to be humble and open ourselves to the magic and the mystery of the universe that surrounds us every single day in nature. And so this brings me to my revelation. This is a personal revelation. It may not be a revelation to you, but it was a revelation to me. And when I'm just sharing that this is a big revelation for me, because I've talked about before, when I was a child, I had an experience of divine love. And I always wanted that experience again. So I was always seeking different practices and paths to experience that divine love again. So we have all the different meditation practices, mindfulness meditation, Kriya Yoga, Zen meditation, and I would go into these experiences of vastness, of joy, of bliss, of freedom, all these amazing experiences, but I could not get to that love experience that I originally had. And I was just like, what is the path for that? What's the practice for the love? I couldn't find it. I even went to a community, for those of you who don't know, there's a community that's mega community, like this same ideology, but mega. And the minister's amazing. Michael Beckwith, I talked to him earlier, just his mind, his state of consciousness is huge, vast, amazing. Lived in that community, incredible, the energy on a Sunday morning, you're just like in this expanded state. And the church itself is called Agape. It's about unconditional love. I was in my right place. I was trying to find this love, agape love. So the way I learned it was, in Greek, most of you know this, Greek, there's 4 types of love. Familial love, right? Platonic love, which is the love between friendships. Eros, which is romantic love. And then agape love. Agape love is the highest form of love because it's just pure unconditional love. It's not love that doesn't come and go, it just love is. So this whole time it's agape love, agape love, agape love. And then this very week, I was reading in I don't know how to say his name because I've never said it out loud, Porphyrios. He had a chapter called Divine Eros. And he said, what we all have a longing for is divine Eros. To love the divine with our whole heart, body, soul, to be madly in love. And he called the divine the lover, and we are the beloved. And the lover loves the beloved, and the beloved loves the lover. And to be in this passionate romance. And he said that divine Eros is always directing us to a higher state of being. And I'm like, that's it. It's not just love is, like beingness, that's great, but it's not like the love, when I watch a film, or read a book, but I watch movies more, where someone unexpectedly does something incredibly kind or incredibly loving, and you have those experiences, like you don't expect it, and suddenly your heart is, it's so beautiful, and you start crying, the tears of love. I mean, the romantic comedies are great too, because they're fun and they're playful, but then there's that deep, passionate love. I wasn't finding that love on my spiritual journey, because our love is the agape love, where we're just in love, we're just being love, but there's a passion. I was missing that passion. That same passion that was evoked when I was a child. How do you get that? You be in love. Well, how do you do that being a spiritually sophisticated spiritual journer? Because what do we know? We know there's no concept we know there's no God, there's no form. Not only is God not Father, God is in a mother. God has no gender. I'm told constantly, there's no gender to God. God is genderless. God is all of these things, but more. God, any concept we have of God, you're wrong, because it's a human concept. So there's nothing in the human realm that can reflect God. So how do you be in love with nothing? How do you fall in love? How do you have a divine eros for something that is, well, it's empty and it's fullness all at once, because it's a divine paradox? And you can go into meditation and be in that state, but to live in it every day, how do you evoke passion when it's already been given? And that's when I had another eureka moment. That's why everybody loves nature. Because in our spiritually sophisticated world, that's the one form that we still know. When we go out there, we feel the divine and we can love it. And when we listen to Mary, man, that was a beautiful reading. You just did it so gorgeously, Gloria. And when you hear Mary Oliver's, so it's nature, and Cher, along with Gloria loves Mary Oliver, and gave a lot of other resources for nature. And I thought, well, there'll just be a few poems, like every poem is nature, 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 because that's where we feel God now. Who created the world? She doesn't. People who are really letting go of the old ideas of God, you let all the old ideas of God, but if you don't let something new come forth, you're sort of lost, because we are here to love. Divine eros is an action. It's something we do. It's not just something we be. We do it. And how do you do it if you can't see it? How do you be raised to these higher levels if you have nothing that you're stretching for? And when we go out into nature, and you don't have to go off into the forest, you can just find it in the miracles of a flower. I'm looking at this beautiful blooming tree out here. It's everywhere. Every single day we are surrounded by nature. Air. We're surrounded by air. To be in love and allow ourselves to be like children, to love passionately the energy that is behind nature. Because as I said, we know that we didn't create nature. We know nature of itself didn't create it. I was thinking about this whole idea of Mother Nature, and as we get older, often we end up taking care of our parents, and that as we get older humanly, it's our job to take care of her, even as she takes care of us. To love her, to allow ourselves to be the beloved, and to love her and let her love us back, to receive her love through messages from nature, from animals and plants and things that show up. There's something so extraordinary. It's a divine love affair. Don't you love that? Divine eros, to be in love. Master Eckhart said, if the only prayer that you pray is thank you, that's enough. And to me, that's the prayer that we pray when we're in nature. We feel that energy of thank you. Thank you. We are so loved. We are surrounded by the divine all the time. And we know that spiritually, but to be able to actually, with our senses, connect with it every single day. John Beauty said that's just absolutely essential to his life. Every day he goes out to nature. And he said, it's my way of connecting with something higher, and I always look for something new. Even though I live in the same place, I walk out of my yard, and I'm like, what can I see new today in nature? That's his way of opening up that portal of wonder and of love. So I invite all of us on this beautiful month to really, really be aware of nature that's everywhere. Right outside our door, the air in our room, the plants that you have in your house, the animals that you have. Everywhere we go, we are surrounded by God's love that is constantly giving of itself to us. And we give ourselves to it, and miracles and wonders happen. Let's give thanks and pray. And so let's just begin with gratitude. Thank you, thank you, thank you, God. Thank you, divine, eternal presence, divine light, divine joy, divine love, the lover of all life, the lover who created herself into creation and takes care and nurtures herself with kindness and connection, who is her greatest friend, who is the source of our life as human beings, as our beautiful human nature. She's caring and nurturing for us. And so we just let ourselves bask in gratitude. Even as we hold this experience of nature that we've all, the many experiences, but then the experience we call forth today, just to be thankful, so profoundly thankful that this experience was a gift from God herself, from this divine presence, giving herself to us in that moment in such a unique and personal and intimate way with so much love. And we give so much love back to that experience, so much gratitude. To God be the glory, to this divine light, this divine form that has shown up in my life as love. We give thanks for our five senses. We don't turn away from our five senses. We open our five senses because it's these five senses that are helping us open and to see and to feel something that is so much greater through love, through the physicalness of love, through the visual, the auditory, the smell, the fragrance, the taste of the divine. We just love all of it and receive all of it. How grateful I am that all of us are both the lover and the beloved. How grateful I am for all of nature. And so let us all be in this presence right here and right now, feeling nature's wonder. That just think of where you're living and the nature that surrounds your home, and just give thanks for the wonder of the nature just around your home. You might not even think about it. That's inside your home, that's just outside your home. And then let it expand. And think of the nature that exists right here in a city, in the urban life, the Golden Gate Park, all the nature that is everywhere in the Bay Area. The nature that is in this nation. Oh my gosh, the amazing nature that is alive and vital and so fully beautiful and radiating its love. Even this very moment it is radiating love in so many different forms. Let us just open our heart, our body, our mind and soul in awe, in love, in gratitude for the amazingness of spirit as this incredible nature that pervades the United States, that pervades North America, South America, all the 7 continents, all the oceans in between, the world underneath the oceans, in the sky, into the galaxies, into the billions and billions of galaxies and stars and trillions. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, God. Thank you. Thank you for those beings on the other side of the veil who let us know that they're there through this beautiful thing called nature. And as we give our love back, say thank you. Love knows no death. Love is forever giving of itself and ever receiving of itself. And we are the center of all this giving and receiving, and our hearts are wide open. And any healing that needs to be happen, we call it forth now, because everything is possible. All healing is possible. In this infinite power, intelligence, wisdom, grace, that she is, as all of us, here and now. Love with no borders, love with no limit, love with no condition, just infinite oceanic love. We are it now. Thank you, thank you, thank you. In deep, abiding gratitude, in joy, we let it be, as we say together, and so it is.
I walk in God in all I do. walk in God in all that I say.